This is Linda Favela, Psalm 104. It's 35 verses with a consistent theme throughout that the natural world we see around us is glorious and marvelous. Therefore, the God who created it and sustains it is glorious and marvelous as well. Let's explain the difficult lines before we read the psalm. In verse 3, speaking of the appearance of the sky and clouds, God lays the beams of his rooms in the waters. That's probably a reference to the way rain looks from a distance. In open country, we can see a rainstorm far off like a shaft of vertical lines coming down from the sky. Is somewhat similar to the vertical beams that support a building. Thus the line, God lays the beams of his rooms in the waters, as if those beams of water support God's dwelling place in the sky. In verse 4, this verse is easy to interpret because Hebrews 1:7 interprets it for us. He makes his messengers winds, his servants flames of fire. The messengers are angels, according to Hebrews 1:7. God makes the angels like wind and flames of fire. This verse is set in the context of the appearance of the sky. As sunrise and sunset, the clouds take on a color like fire. Fiery clouds and wind remind the psalmist of the glorious angels coming and going from heaven as God's messengers. He makes his messengers winds, his servants flames of fire. It's in keeping with the rest of the psalm that the glory of the natural world should inspire us to glorify God. Verses 5 to 9 describe God's act of creation in Genesis chapter 1. In this psalm, you covered it with the deep as with a cloak, meaning God covered the earth with water as with a cloak. There was no dry land at first. The land was cloaked over by water during creation. In verse 6 of the psalm, the waters were above the mountains, but at God's rebuke in verse 7, the waters fled, dry land appeared, and God set the boundaries of the seas that they should come so far up to the dry land and no further. And in verses 5 to 9 of the psalm, so God's glorious for having done all that. It's the psalmist picture in his mind that he has of creation. Skipping over some verses that are understandable and dropping down to verse 15, the psalmist praises God for providing wine to make glad the heart of man. Though that line is crystal clear in the meaning of it, some Christians reject it, that God provided wine for our enjoyment. Personally, your narrator isn't going to touch alcohol. There's no need to cloud the mind with it or risk addiction or risk alcohol-related tragedy, and he wishes his children wouldn't touch it, but he doesn't preach against it because God provided wine to make our hearts glad. If anyone disagrees, he's disagreeing with verse 15 of the psalm. At the Last Supper, Jesus said he wasn't going to touch the fruit of the vine again until he drinks it with us new in his Father's kingdom, Matthew 26:29. Jesus is waiting until the marriage supper of the Lamb to drink wine again. He drank it during his lifetime, but he won't drink it again until he drinks it with us. Your narrator's waiting on him. Verse 24 is a statement of the theme of the psalm. Since the psalm is an account of the wonders of the created world, verse 24 puts it in a nutshell by saying, "How many are your works? In wisdom you have made them all." Verses 25 to 30 turn attention to the sea and the multitude of creatures in it, including Leviathan, a large twisting serpent of the sea, Isaiah 27:1. God feeds all those creatures, gives them breath, then takes away their breath, and they die. But in the next verse, God sends out his Spirit, and new generations of the sea creatures are born. In verse 30, God renews the face of the ground. In Israel, there's almost zero rain in the summer months. The landscape turns brown. When the rains return, there's greenery again, and God gets credit by the psalmist for renewing the face of the ground. The rest of it should be understandable, so here we go, Psalm 104, starting in verse 1 and going all the way through the 35 verses of it uninterrupted. Bless Yahweh, my soul. Yahweh, my God, you are very great. You're clothed with honor and majesty. He covers himself with light as with a garment. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain. He lays the beams of his rooms in the waters. He makes the clouds his chariot. He walks on the wings of the wind. He makes his messengers winds, his servants flames of fire. He laid the foundations of the earth that it should not be moved forever. You covered it with the deep as with a cloak. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they fled. At the voice of your thunder they hurried away. The mountains rose, the valleys sank down to the place which you had assigned to them. You have set the boundary that they may not pass over, that they don't turn again to cover the earth. He sends springs into the valleys. They run among the mountains. They give drink to every animal of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. The birds of the sky nest by them. They sing among the branches. He waters the mountains from his rooms. The earth is filled with the fruit of your works. He causes the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may produce food out of the earth, wine that makes glad the heart of man, oil to make his face to shine, and bread that strengthens man's heart. Yahweh's trees are well watered, the cedars of Lebanon which he has planted, where the birds make their nests. The stork makes its home in the cypress trees. The high mountains are for the wild goats. The rocks are a refuge for the rock badgers. He appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows when to set. You make darkness, and it is night, in which all the animals of the forest prowl. The young lions roar after their prey and seek their food from God. The sun rises, and they steal away and lay down in their dens. Man goes out to his work, to his labor until the evening. Yahweh, how many are your works? In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your riches. There is the sea, great and wide, in which are innumerable living things, both small and large animals. There the ships go, and Leviathan, whom you formed to play there. These all wait for you, that you may give them their food in due season. You give to them, they gather. You open your hand, they're satisfied with good. You hide your face, they're troubled. You take away their breath, they die and return to the dust. You send out your spirit, and they are created. You renew the face of the ground. Let Yahweh's glory endure forever. Let Yahweh rejoice in his works. He looks at the earth, and it trembles. He touches the mountains, and they smoke. I'll sing to Yahweh as long as I live. I'll sing praise to my God while I have any being. Let my meditation be sweet to him. I will rejoice in Yahweh. Let sinners be consumed out of the earth. Let the wicked be no more. Bless Yahweh, my soul. Praise Yah. Comment, let's look at the beauty around us, at the wonders of creation, large and small, day and night, high and deep, all the diversity of it, and praise God. Psalm 105 is next.